internet to be able to go and find out what was going to happen to us. You guys have the legal, you have Barry and Lowe's book, you have others like myself coming out with books. And you know, not to have that is huge because you are alone in this. You're so alone because you, just like all of you feel, you're crazy. They'll tell you you're crazy. And when my case started, my daughter was 2.5 with the abuse, and there was evidence of things coming out, and I didn't even get a chance to know anything that was happening. I went into social services for her to have a visit. I just had met with a psychologist that told me absolutely she's being abused and that what she had said in the report. And I go into social services, and the father being very manipulative and controlling, psychopath like they all are. I go in there and I find out they wanted me to sit down and go over information with me. The first thing she said to me, with the social service people in there, this is parental alienation. I'd never heard the term before. And I said, parental alienation? I said, I've been over backwards for this man to be in her life. I'm in there with the perpetrator. And she said, this is parental alienation. And I said, well, I have a great relationship with my own father. Why would, you know, I don't get this. I said, maybe, well, you're coaching her. And I said, maybe it's true, and, you know, you need to listen to the child. And she said, she went through 4 other things that they were setting up for me. I was set up before I even walked in. And they had already, she'd been on the case for months, and I hadn't even met her. I met her that day. And she said, this child's going into foster care. And I'd never been away from my daughter. I had full custody of her, never been away from her. I go in, and she goes, this child's going into foster care. I had just hired an attorney the day before. And I called my attorney, but I couldn't get a hold of him. And then finally, I left a message of what was going on. And I went into another room, and I laid my head on a desk, but I held together because I knew they were going to say, oh, this mother's emotionally inept, and she can't handle it, whatever. So I walked into another room, I laid my head on a desk, and I was sobbing where I couldn't breathe, like in shock, and they came up and they tapped me on the shoulder, and they said, you can go say goodbye to your daughter now. And I couldn't even walk, and I thought, okay, I can do this, because I wanted her to know that otherwise they weren't going to let me see her, so she wouldn't have even known. So I'm walking down a hallway, and all of them are standing there, and they go, look at her, she can't handle it, she can't say goodbye to her daughter. And I put my arm out to the side, and I said, oh, yes, I can. And because I wanted her to know. And the night before, she had said to me, I started to cry, and I never cried in front of her, and I never said to her, which I think is really important for you guys, if you have abuse going on, is never say to them, let them talk, but don't say anything back to them, just listen. And that's what I did. My daughter continued to talk, believe me. So I'm walking down the hallway, and the night before I had said to her, started to cry, and because she wouldn't sleep at night, she was screaming out in the night, arching her back 5 and 6 inches off the bed, screaming out, no, Daddy, don't, Howie, it's bad, 5 and 6 times a night I'm up with her. So, and grabbing, down there. So I walked down the hallway, and that night she had said to me, when I started to cry, because she wouldn't sleep at night and I had her with me, she said, Mommy, you're just tired, you just need some rest. And I said, we're buddies. And she said, buddies? She never heard that before. And I said, yeah, we're buddies. And she liked that. The next day, I must have felt this coming on. You know how you got that sixth sense? But not this. And I go in and I say goodbye to her. And she goes, where are you going? Because we were going roller skating. And I left, and they had police there to escort me out. So now I don't even know, I'm in a city where I don't know where my daughter is. And then from that point on, she went into foster care. From that point on, they continued the charade like we all know goes on. I fought, and I fought. Well, she ends up, they pull her out of foster care, they put her in with another foster care parent. And this time, I'm going to try and skip through some of this, but anyway, what ends up happening, I do get her back, but once I get her back at home, if I ever bring up the sexual abuse again, I was going to lose her. So no matter what she said to me, I did not bring it up again because I would lose her. I ended up losing custody, and even though the evidence that came out, there was a police report stating she was being sexually abused, it was incredible. It was 18 pages, and it went to the DA's office, and they wouldn't prosecute it. So, long story short, at about 4.5 years of age, it's still going on, but I can't protect her. and I can't say anything about the abuse, and if I do, I'm going to lose her like I told you. So 4.5, she's really in pain down there, and you can't shut up. I never stopped fighting. I ended up getting the news media on my case, and in those days, you couldn't get the news behind these cases. They didn't touch them, and nobody knew about sexual abuse of children. They didn't listen to it. They didn't, nothing. So I get the news media behind me, and they cover my case thoroughly. And they I tape recorded myself, so when I ended up losing her at 4.5 and getting supervised visits. And when I did, for no grounds whatsoever. And I ended up tape recording myself when I go into the supervised visits, and I tape recorded myself. I think that's really important for you to do. Not to let them know you're doing it, but wire yourself. I wired myself when I went to the DA's office when he stated he believed my child was being abused, but wouldn't prosecute the case. With the news coverage, I use those tapes on the news. I have those here today, but it's too much information to go through. But once I lost her at 4.5, I had 2 therapists known throughout the state of Colorado siding with the man, father, and never finding abuse. And their names, Leona Kopetsky and Claire Purcell. I think Purcell's still around, but they believe in Richard Gardner's theory and Underwater. And Richard Gardner, we know who he is, most of you, what he's done. And that quotations were all throughout my final court orders. And the GAL in the beginning that said it was parental alienation was paying Richard Gardner in my case. And I don't even know that's going on. State-funded money paying Richard Gardner. So I ended up losing I lost my daughter, and how they did it was, I was on a flight to Washington, D.C., because what I started doing was lobbying in Washington, D.C., and I testified before Congress right after that. And once I testified before Congress, and I saw that there were so many of these other mothers, well, there was only 10 of us, but the 10 that were there gave you the empowerment, which is happening to you guys today, to get in there and fight and never, ever shut up. And that's what you have to do. You can never be quiet. You can never, I was not a quiet mother. I mean, I held it together because I knew they'd use it against me with everything I had, and I abided by all their rules. But once they took her away from me, Katie barred the doors, but I didn't know that was going to happen. What they did is I'm in Washington, D.C. lobbying, and I kept everything quiet under the wraps of what I was doing outside of the state of Colorado. So I'm lobbying in Washington, D.C., and I pick up the phone to call home to my attorneys. And they said, there's an emergency hearing on the phone right now, and they're taking your daughter away from you. And I said, my God, how can they do that? I said, I'm not even in the state. And they said, well, we have to take phone calls to judge. And I said, you tell my attorneys not to take that phone call. I'm not even in the state, they cannot do this. And she said, Maralee, it's a judge, you have to take the call. So those 2 therapists, who are quacks, who are Richard Gardner and Underwater and Wakefield, that believe in pedophilia, Richard Gardner, who states it's okay for the pedophile to come out of the closet and choose whom he wants to love, it's God's will, and all this is what they're stating. And you take that document to a judge on a Monday morning, and here I am in Washington, and I find out I've lost my daughter over the phone. And I got on that airplane, and actually I was not lobbying that day, I was a flight attendant, and I was going back and forth to Washington. I would come in and lobby all day with Sherry Quirk's firm, McPherson in hand, and I would lobby all day, and then I would wear my uniform into here, and then I would go to Washington, D.C., go to her firm, switch into a nice suit, lobby all day, go back in my uniform, and go back. So here I am, and I hear this on the phone, I have to get on a flight and work it back. And I ended up going into the lavatory, and as those engines roared, believe me, I roared. And I can't even express the pain of that. And so anyway, I can, because I know a lot of you have experienced it. So now it's the lobbying I start doing. I have a rally at the Capitol. I've heard about April Curtis's case, but we didn't really connect. But I did connect with lots of others, and Joan Pennington was one of the biggest attorneys in the nation on this. She was incredible, and we became very, very close, and she talked me into doing a rally at the Capitol. For 6 months we planned this rally. I mean, I got big speakers in the trees, I got everybody to donate everything, I had porta potties, I got every media station there. I mean, they were all there. I sent out press releases. I mean, I don't know how I did it. I don't remember doing it all until I saw the documentary about a couple of months ago, because I never watched it. My heart was just shocked, I mean, watching that documentary, because These mothers that were at that rally were so incredible. They were so strong. Were you there, Yay?
What was the documentary?
Huh?
What was the documentary?
There wasn't a documentary. It actually isn't yet. I'm sorry. I was putting together what I have here, CNN. I put together CNN, all the rallies that I did, all the speeches I did, that kind of thing. Because someday, I think it can be really used to show what's going on with you guys. So Joan Pennington, I put this rally on, and she had me doing the work here, but she brought in professional singers. She brought in big organizations, and Lions Rights for Children were there, and everybody that was, anybody at that point that was going on, and this Louise Armstrong who wrote Kiss Daddy Goodnight. I was so shocked. I didn't even know who Louise Armstrong was. And I think it was probably a week before that rally, I lost my daughter completely, but I still went through with the rally. Now I had a gag order, and I went through with the rally. And when I was up on the Capitol steps, I mentioned every single person that was involved in my case. The judges, the lawyers, the airports, to share that rally with you today, because that would give you guys such an empowerment to see what they did then and what we can do and the difference we can make. And never stop. You can never ever give up. And so anyway, with all that said, I went through, I was getting ready to run, but I didn't run because I didn't think they could do what they did, because my God, I had 3 police reports, 3 hospital reports, physical evidence. How can they ignore physical evidence from Children's Hospital, the top doctors in the state of Colorado? Most of the time you don't have physical evidence. My daughter had lacerations and abrasions on the inside and an 8mm opening at 4 years old, and they returned her to her father the next day. So I just didn't think they could ignore all that. So this is really scary because they can and they will. So anyway, I didn't run. I stayed in the system and fought, and I ended up with supervised visits. I didn't think they could do what they did, and so I ended up with supervised visits, but I went on, and this is another thing I'm going to tell you. I believe that if you get stuck in those supervised visits, no matter how much it kills you, no matter how painful that is, every mother that I went through this with, I don't know, I can list the ones that they're actually in my book, but you know, they didn't make it because they couldn't stay in those supervised visits, because those are the most painful part of this that you'll go through. It is absolutely gut-wrenching. And so a lot of them lost for that reason. They lost for other reasons. We've got lots of reasons. And parental rights, they lost because they didn't stay in the supervised visits. And the other thing is because my daughter, I did stay in those, we have a relationship. And most of those cases, they don't have their daughter. Unless they ran or whatever, or their son or whoever being abused, they lost him. So there was one thing I wanted to read to you that's in here that I think is, my book, that's another thing I was going to say. The reason I wrote this book is because at 2 years old, when this was going on, I was so angry at the system and for what was going on. I decided, and then I thought my ex would kill me, so I wanted my daughter to know the truth. And so everything I have done is for my daughter to know the truth and to help others out there. I will never stop fighting, and I will never stop fighting for all of you. And any way we can make a difference. Yay! Maybe that means a lot to me too, but see, you'll cry 25 years later. You will be crying. But if, you know, we're working on things, Connie and I are, and there's several of us that are working on a whole new avenue to this, because nothing else seemed to work. And, you know, it doesn't matter what you bring in, and I just have recently had a case in Colorado that I went court watching. We do a lot of court watching, and we worked on a lot of legislation there. And I could go into that too, but that's a lot more information that I don't have that much time. But anyway, what I want to tell you is that case I went to, I told that mother before she went in, I read her reports and everything in her case, and I saw the writing on the wall, and I said, Jen, I hate to tell you this, but you have a very strong chance of losing custody and possibly supervised visits. Now, that was a horrible thing for me to do and a hard thing for me to do, but really, I would have loved somebody to have given me a warning, because it was such a frickin' blow that how could you possibly, I just wish somebody could have just eased me a little bit, because I had no clue. And so, anyway, she did lose custody, and she did get supervised visits 1 hour a week, and they didn't listen to any of the domestic violence, which she had tons of domestic violence. She's an incredible mother. So it is still going on big time, and they're still using parental alienation when we know that Richard Gardner has been voided out. He has no AMA approval, nothing, and he's still out there. His message is still out there. They know they're not supposed to use it in court, but they still are. So this is just one thing I want to leave you with, and then Connie's going to play my CNN thing on parental alienation, and I just think it's helpful, that's all. I think it'll help you in some way. Okay, so this is something I want to read to you. We true natural women, I don't know if I can read it, I'll try. Okay, we true natural women cannot live without our children. We had rather die than have them torn from us as your law. I'm gonna have to put it down. My eyes are still too bad. Okay. We true natural women cannot live without our children. We had rather die than have them torn from us by your laws and allow them to be spirit wrongs or the keenest wounds that can be inflicted upon women. When woman is brought before our man's courts and our man's juries and has no marks of violence upon her person, it is hard to realize that her whole physical system may be breathing in agony for spirit wrongs, such as can only be understood by her peers. Spiritual, sensitive women suffer on in silent anguish without an appeal till death. Kindly liberate her from her prison of unappreciated suffering. That's all of you guys. So. The connection between all of our eyes and when we meet, it's amazing. Nobody knows this pain but you. And the professionals that are helping, they see it, and thank God for them, but nobody knows, and I still say, go for it. Just get in there and go for it. You fight and you speak out, and every person I told, I thought, I start telling everybody, because at first I was kind of shocked and they think I was crazy. But I started telling everybody, and I realized that you tell that person tells that person, and pretty soon they come up to me and they go, my God, Maralee, since you told me your story, I heard this, this, and this. So it's really important to communicate, get it out there, fight, never, never give up. Okay, I am done.
I told you it was a radical notion. I don't think it's a wrong-headed notion, but it is certainly radical. But we need to talk about the possibility of demanding funding that only kicks in when the offender is in prison. Right? Do you understand what I mean? Why might that matter? Why might it be a good idea to support programs for incarcerated batterers and child abusers? Think about it, right? Then all of a sudden that same system that pushes offenders out into the free world and supports these unjust results in family court is going to at least put some pressure in the opposite direction. In a minute we might get balance. So there's at least as much of an incentive on the part of the family court judge to get the case into criminal court as to keep the guy out on the street. Why would it be a bad thing for us to say we want people who go to prison to be treated when they're in prison? I mean, that sounds like a kind of a good thing to do anyway, right? I support treatment for incarcerated batterers and child abusers. That doesn't even sound like a mean thing. We can and should promote that idea. How to do it, to me, is partly an Ann Stevenson question, because she knows how those funding incentives exist already that push in the wrong direction. Let's just do the same thing. Get somebody on the Hill to support the concept with regard to shifting priorities. We don't have to pass a new law, just a shift in priorities to create better balance. Radical idea number one. Radical idea number two, political mobilization around the election of the district attorney. Why is this critically important? Because every single story that I've ever heard at this conference in all the years I've been coming involves some kind of criminal violence. And the system is designed to decriminalize violence against women and children by calling it a family problem. Who gets to decide whether it's a crime or not? Exactly. I mean, we call it a crime, but we have no value. If we are not the government, we can't designate something a crime except in the abstract sense. We can't call something a crime and then cause it to be treated as such unless we use our power as people and the power of democracy itself to vote intentionally, to elect only prosecutors who will call it a crime and will file charges and will treat it for what it is, first and foremost a crime. It might also be a family court problem, but it is first and foremost a crime. Why is criminalizing the crime a good idea? Well, because that's what it is. And we have lived in this country for long enough under a legal regime that has failed to respect and honor violence against women and children as a crime at least as serious as stealing somebody's stuff. But we do a damn good job prosecuting people who steal our stuff. The disparity in the failure of our prosecution system has been measured over and over again. We don't need data. The data in support of the Violence Against Women Act that Joe Biden submitted to Congress in the early 90s, Detours on the Road to Justice, compared. How are we doing as a nation prosecuting just the crime of rape, which is, clearly a gender-specific targeted form of violence? How are we doing? Well, he compared rape to theft crimes and proved in data across this country proved that on average we disproportionately punish people who steal and disproportionately decriminalize people who destroy women's bodies and lives. So that bill that was filed in connection with that data, the Violence Against Women Act, was then funded over the course of, how old is it now? 20, how many years has it been? 20 years, right? So we have 20 years of substantial amounts of federal dollars, our dollars, designed to redress that problem, the disparity in enforcement of laws against violence against women, 20 years of spending tons of money, and the crime is worse. Think about that, right? So the data back in the mid-90s was something like 1 in 6 women reporting rape. All that money gets spent, and in 2011 the number was up to 1 in 5. Excellent, so glad we spent all that money doing something to stop that problem. I mean, that is an embarrassment. What the hell are we doing with that money? One would argue that what we did with that money was send activists into the corner to do busy work, meaningless busy work, to make us feel better about substandard justice. That is the growing sense. We should applaud the strength that it takes to say what I just said out loud.
Thank you.
And I don't mean me, I mean all of us being competent enough to feel safe and empowered enough to say out loud, the Violence Against Women Act has been a source of co-optation. Now, does that mean they're not doing anything well? No, of course the Violence Against Women Act does a lot of very good things. But somebody has to say, how has it gotten worse? The problem has gotten worse. Who's overseeing why that happened and how that happened and proposing the remedies? Who is in charge? I don't know, but I would like to know, because I feel like the answer is nobody's in charge. And a lot of people who do very good work and are very sincere in this business, their lives now depend on those paychecks that flow from that money. Am I supposed to ask them to give up their homes because I don't like how the money is being dispersed? No. But I would like people to at least talk about it as a very, very significant part of the problem. How do we deal with this problem of electing prosecutors, which, by the way, now doesn't, this is going to cost any of that money, and we can sort of leave the bow out of this. We have to mobilize in thinking about who we're electing as prosecutors, because if we choose to vote for only the prosecutors who will deal with violence against women and children as a crime, which shouldn't be a complicated decision anyway, how many years did we spend in the aftermath of the women's movement demanding that our government officials understand violence in the home is no different than violence in the middle of Main Street, right? The personal crime is the political crime. The violence behind closed doors is as much a public problem as the violence in the middle of Main Street. We fought so hard to get our elected officials to know that, to believe it. Crime is a public problem, no less so when it happens in a child's bedroom or behind closed doors in anyone's private home. And if we believe that, then we are the problem, because we keep electing prosecutors who will not treat violence in the home first and foremost as a crime. We are responsible. I have never seen anybody in this country mobilize to elect a district attorney based on their commitment to stop this violence. I've never seen it. Now, I'm not an activist in that sense. I don't know how to mobilize people and do phone trees and leaflets, and that's not my thing. I'm an academic activist. I write amicus briefs. I design impact litigation. How I sue state court judges in federal court. And it's not easy to do that. So I have a skill set, but I want somebody who knows how to mobilize politically to ask me to help in that. Who is going to do it? It's not that complicated. Thank you. Okay, we have a vote. Do I hear 500? No. It is not complicated. We mobilize a lot about things that we care about. The internet is like this, available to us. Snap of a finger. Ultraviolet, you know, whatever I mean, there's so much on the internet. All we have to do is decide to mobilize. What district attorneys are running for office in your county? Most of us don't even know who they are. And when we vote for district attorney, we vote for whoever we think is on the news the most, talking about locking up the killers. Oh, he makes me feel safe, I'll vote for him. Or we vote for whoever the name is that we recognize the most, without even asking the question, does he reject out of hand the cases that land on his desk involving the rape of children, the violence against women? Prosecutors who care about this issue will sometimes say, vote for me. I win 95% of my rape cases. Vote for me. And I say, do I look that stupid? You win 95% of your cases. How many did you reject? Don't tell me how many you won. Tell me how many you took on. If you took on 10 and you won 9, but you rejected 700, you're not getting my vote. And by the way, define what you mean by win. Because if you reduced a rape charge to spitting on the sidewalk and let the guy plead to probation, that's not a win, that's a loss. And I'm not voting for you. Don't treat me like I'm stupid, right? How about mobilizing in this way? Very simple idea. Very simple. Next time a DA is running for office, we send a note signed by 8 million women, 8,000, 800, I don't care, that says, we are going to vote as a block in response to your answer to the following questions. How do you intend to divide up your budget? How much of your budget is going to drug cases? How much of your budget is going to rape cases? How much of your budget is dedicated to child abuse cases? Are you willing to issue an annual report card on violence against women, an annual report card on child abuse, telling us how many cases were brought to your attention, how many you rejected, and decriminalized by that rejection and sent off to family court? How many? And if you won't give us that data every year in an annual report card, we will run you out of office. We will not vote for you, and if you get elected, we will protest in front of your office until the pain is unbearable and you quit in shame. That costs nothing. I mean, we don't have any money. That costs nothing to do. And no one's ever done it. Why? Because we're doing busy work, meaningless busy work, on this problem. No, I'm busy. No, it's not that I'm too busy. I do what I do that I'm good at. I am not a mobilizer in a political sense. That is not my thing. I wouldn't know how to do it. And I'm
Could
not
you open this
interested in
for
it.
me?
But I know that if someone else did it, I would help. I can't do it. It's not my thing.
I have had this conversation with the DA's office, and the response
That's okay. So then you say, and excuse me, since when is the word of a woman or child not enough for you?
And then they say that in this circumstance, they say that it's money and we need multiple victims.
That's the same as saying the word of a child is not enough.
And so
Money means politically you have just been subjugated because you're not worth enough.
but specifically, I mean, like from a pragmatic standpoint, what they said is the last several months that we've taken with more evidence, we've lost.
Too bad. Do it anyway. Who the hell ever said prosecution needed to be successful? You take on cases if you believe in them. They are extremely cheap to bring. And this is how you bring a case, right? Oh, you reported child abuse and it's a credible claim? Okay. Here's how that goes. Here's how expensive it is to put on a case like that, right? You call that child to court on the day of the trial and you say, tell us what happened. What happened next? What happened after that? Thank you, no further questions. I rest my case. And then you win or you lose, but you did justice. Any prosecutor who tells you that the definition of justice is controlled by whether or not they think they can win does not deserve your vote. And if you vote for them anyway, then you deserve a bad prosecutor. That's really how simple it is. A jury, here's what some prosecutors say to me, because I was one. Some prosecutors say to me, that we need to do a lot better dealing with how our jurors are selected. For example, in a lot of states in this country, we select jurors in child abuse cases in part based on whether the juror, either herself or someone close to her, has ever been a victim of sexual abuse. In a lot of states, if this were my jury veneer, right, and I'm getting ready to try a case, the judge would say, has anyone or anyone close to you ever been a victim of child sex abuse? And if you raise your hand, which 9 out of 10 women do, you're bumped. Bye-bye. Right? We never ask the question, have you or anyone close to you ever molested a child? We just don't ask. Hence, we get jurors full of perpetrators, and there's your not guilty verdict. Right? So reforming the legal system in terms of criminal justice also means thinking about the ways in which problems in society land in the courtroom. Land in the courtroom. And when they land in the courtroom, how do they provoke injustice? That's an example. It's not the only reason, but it is one of the reasons. Jurors being allowed to vote based on biases, stereotypes, prejudices, bigotry, that has no business being in a court of law. No business. If a juror ever said, I've decided not to believe that witness because they're black, would we tolerate that? Well, what the hell? I mean, they say all the time, I couldn't believe that child because, you know, they didn't speak in full sentences. It's a form of discrimination, but kids just don't have that protected class status, and it's a problem. But we still don't have to tolerate it because it's unfair. Okay, next idea. Couple of quick things. Constitutional rights on behalf of children. We tend to think of children as something other, and it's true that they don't have the full panoply of constitutional rights.